Okay, welcome back. Welcome to Module 4. We're going to be talking about basic data manipulation and formulas. But before we get to those formulas, what I want to do is a couple of different things to help with data manipulation. The first one is grouping and ungrouping of your data. And so I'm going to show you real quickly how you can group and ungroup your data. And basically it creates an outline for you that you can use to very easily kind of manipulate and view your data. What we're going to do is we're going to sort this by, we're going to throw a filter on first, and then we're going to sort this by job title because I want everything to be, all the job titles to be together. We're going to do A to Z. So I wanted all of our chief engineers here up at the top, and you can see that our chief engineers are there. So let's say that we want to group our chief engineers together in an outline kind of form. All we need to do is highlight those rows, and we're going to drag it all the way down, click and drag to row 22. We're going to come up here to group and click on the button, and it's going to give us this line with a little minus sign here. If we click this minus sign, you'll see all those chief engineers go away, and that's because they're all grouped together, and we've kind of basically shrunk them up. So if we hit the plus sign again, they show back up again. Let's say we want to group within there, those chief engineers, we want to group these first kind of 5 employees here. We can highlight those again and hit group, and we get another group. So we can minimize those 5. We still have the rest of the chief engineers, and then we can minimize those as well. Really easily, you can get back to your original kind of data set here by clicking on these different levels of your outline. So 1, 2, and 3 up at the top, we have 3 levels. 1 being the overall data set, 2 being this first kind of chief engineer group, and 3 being the 5 employees over the top. And you can again kind of shrink that back down if you want to. If you want to ungroup your data, all you need to do is make sure that it's all visible, and then you can highlight it again, come up here to ungroup and hit ungroup, and then back to your other 5, ungroup, and now we're back to our original data set. So that's grouping and ungrouping. Again, just a way to manipulate your data, a way to kind of look at your data and group things together just to make it easier to view. Because when you have big data sets with entire populations of the company, it can get pretty unwieldy, and there are times when you'd want to group those folks together. The next trick that I want to show you is called text to columns. And this one is a really good trick to use when you have, for example, let's say you want to pull out someone's first name and last name separated into columns, and in your HRMS, for example, they're smushed together and separated by a space. This is an easy trick to do to get the entire column to separate. So instead of going back through, and retyping everyone's name, it's a really easy trick that I'll teach you right now. So basically, first what you want to do, because you're going to be separating, what we're going to do is separate job title. And if we click on our drop down here, because we have filters on, what I'm going to look for now is how many different words or characters do we have in our titles. So when I say characters, I mean the 1, 2, and 3 behind engineer. And it looks like our longest title is Vice President of Engineering. So what we're going to be doing is separating these things by the space. And so it's going to take Vice and put it in one column, President in another, of in another, Engineering in another. For Chief Engineer, Chief is going to be in one column, Engineer is going to be in another. For Engineer 1, Engineer is going to be in one column, 1 is going to be in another. And so what I wanted to do is figure out what are the largest number of columns that we're going to need, because we need to insert those columns before we do our text to columns. So I'm going to just hit OK because I'm not going to do anything with that. But what I want to do is click here. So I have my black arrow. I'm going to click on this and drag it over, and I'm just going to insert several columns here, and it's going to move our data over. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Chief Engineer, the first one, and I'm going to say Control Shift down arrow, and that's going to highlight all of our job titles here for every employee, right? So we have up to our 500 employees here. You can see it's row 501 because our titles are in the first row. Here's our Vice President of Engineering, by the way, because we are sorted alphabetically. Then I'm going to go to I am going to go to data and find the text to columns. So it's right here, text to columns, and we're going to click on that button, and we're going to say delimited. So characters such as commas or tabs separate each field. Basically, if we did fixed width, you would tell it how many characters you want to have in each of those columns, and it would give you that number of characters. So if we said 4 in every column, it would, in the first column, let's take the chief engineer, it would be CHIE. In the second column, it would be FENG, etc., etc. So what we want to do is say delimited, and you can see down here the preview of the data that we want, just because you want to make sure that it looks like what you're expecting it to look like when you're going through this. So we're going to say next. We're going to click on space because that's how we want to separate things. Uncheck tab. So you can see here chief and engineer are separated, and that's exactly what we want. They're separated because they have a space between them. We're going to say next. Column data format. Typically keep it in general. The destination D2 is here because this is the first one that we have, and then we're going to say finish. There's already data here. Do you want to replace it? For our purposes, we'll say yes, and you can see there that chief engineer is separated. Engineer 1, engineer 2, all the way down. We're going to go down to engineer 3, senior engineer, and then vice president of engineering, you can see there. So that is text to columns. Again, very good trick, cool trick to use when you're trying to get a bunch of text separated out. And you can use any kind of delimiter that you want. So you can use, if your data has a comma in it. So oftentimes you'll see coming out of HRIS systems, it'll be, last name, comma, first name, middle initial. So you can use, you can separate that by first using the comma, then using the space between the last name and middle initial. However you want to do it, you can get pretty creative with it, but it's a really great trick. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z. I'm going to get rid of those extra columns as well, Control Z, and now we're back to our original data set. So that was grouping and ungrouping, and then how to change texts into various columns.